really like to know. Hello, how are you? I'd really like to go for a night on the town with a guy just like you. So hello, how are you? How do you do? Hello, how are you? What you think of me? Hello, how are you? Do you think we could agree to act as one instead of always two? So hello, how are you? How do you do? Hello, how are you? I'd really like to know.
And hello, how are you?
Like
You can call me right now at 888-720-9677, but you won't just be calling me. You'll be calling all of humankind that listens to this particular. Okay, you'd just be calling me, really. 888-720-9677, 888-720-WNPR. We call this show Ask or Tell Me Anything. Didn't mean I'm prepared for your question, but maybe somebody else is prepared for your question or your comment. 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. It doesn't have to be about the election or politics or anything. It could be, but before I do start taking some calls here, it is kind of interesting watching this whole thing unfold in the way that Donald Trump now feels that something really unfair has happened with the switching around of candidates on him. And, nobody was more convinced and possibly more convincing. No, not more convincing, but nobody was more convinced that Joe Biden did not belong at the top of the ticket, that Joe Biden did not belong in the White House than Donald Trump. But but now he's really mad. Now he's really, it was sort of like, yes, he is inadequate. He is too old. He is sleepy. He doesn't know how to do this job. Now, that doesn't mean I don't want him to run. Of course I want him to run. So, I'm just, there's a little irony here is all I'm saying. Donald, you convinced us. Point taken. So we put somebody else in there. Presumably you'll find that interesting and entertaining as well. All right, here is William. First up with something, in fact, I probably don't know anything about, but I'm prepared to be educated about it. Hi, William. William from Middletown.
Hi. Thanks for putting me up. I once again would like to congratulate you on this effort to get Connecticut involved in talking about various issues. It's just wonderful. The reason I was calling today is not about the Donald Trump, although I could stay on the phone for hours talking about that. But I have been getting a lot of texts from people who regarding the anti-Semitic bill that's going through Congress, who, in evaluating it, say that, well, there's nothing wrong with anti-Semitism and bringing it to the fore, but the way this is structured, you cannot mention anything. It's very restrictive as to what you can talk about that you could be prosecuted for, and I think the people behind it is AIPAC. So anyway, I was wondering if you have heard anything more about this particular thing.
No, I'm pretty underinformed about it, but just to clarify, as I'm understanding this is a bill that essentially expands the definition and understanding of what is anti-Semitism, right? I think this is a bill that might have started under Trump, but was continued or pursued under Biden. Am I talking about the right piece of legislation?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't feel well versed enough about it to express an opinion. So, I think what I'm kind of obligated to do is actually find out a little bit more about it. But what is do you have a particular take on it? Because I'm not sure I totally grasped what you were saying.
What I was worried about is that there's a number of issues. Like somebody was saying, I thought it was, I was very uncomfortable with the reception that the Prime Minister of Israel got from our Congress. Standing ovation that really bothered me, and people were saying, "Well, you can't talk about that too much now because it could be considered anti-Semitic." And
Yeah, I think, okay. I mean, I think you and I are kind of on the same page. It should be possible to criticize the policies of a particular regime running a particular country without being anti-Semitic. I mean, a lot of it is how you do it, what your wording is. But when you're being specific to the actions of Netanyahu and his administration against the Palestinian population, if you're specific to that and you're not generalizing from there in a kind of, well, that's how they are kind of attitude. I mean, I think we ought to be able as adults to tell the difference. And certainly having just, a couple of months ago wrapped up teaching on a college campus, I mean, there are a lot of Jewish students, at least on the campus I was on, who are opposed to the activities and positions of the Netanyahu administration, which kind of gives the lie to the idea that you'd be anti-Semitic if you didn't support everything that Israel was doing. I'm assuming now. I haven't seen the crossed T's and dotted I's of this particular bill. I guess it does expand the definition of what anti-Semitism is and what discrimination based on anti-Semitism is. But hopefully, it wouldn't encompass something like that. It wouldn't encompass speech.
Check it out. It just seems like they're trying to limit discussion that could be critical of Israel, and that's what I grew up in Scarsdale, New York, which was a very Jewish town. All my early friends were Jewish. I have great contacts in the community still. And they also, as you were talking about, the students in Yale have issue with Israel's policies under Netanyahu now. So I don't want to see them being restricted, or anybody being restricted as to what they can talk about.
Yeah, I sort of feel, first of all, thanks for calling in about this. I sort of feel that toothpaste is out of the tube. I feel we're having one of the unintentional gifts of Bibi Netanyahu to the American public and maybe to the world at large was to make a conversation that had mostly taken a place a little bit around the margins about the treatment of Palestinians and had been sitting there around the margins for years and years and years, to thrust it more into the center. Now, it's being thrust into the center in a way that I don't think Netanyahu intended or relished, although I'm also kind of wondering what he thought was going to happen. But anyway, thanks for that call. And on to other incredibly important topics, including Bob from Wallingford. This is going to be a good one, and I anticipate a lot of follow-up calls about this, Bob. But state your question. Oh, let me make sure you're there. There you are, Bob. Start over.
Sorry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I've had this argument a few times with family and friends, but the question is a hot dog a sandwich? My gut says no, but then you have to define what a sandwich is. And every time I go through that, I end up saying that the hot dog is a sandwich.
Right. So I should say, first of all, that we, and by we, I sort of mean I have a long-running project for a future episode that's turned into the Guns N' Roses Chinese Democracy of the Colin McEnroe show, in the sense that it's taking me a long time to bring it to fruition. But I want to do a show in a very specific way, in a very specific format, about a related topic, which is whether or not sandwiches should be cut on the diagonal, as opposed to the way that they are more often cut. But I think that can lead us, in a very sort of, Lyceum type categorical way of thinking, over to the hot dog. So I don't think a hot dog is a sandwich either. And I think when somebody says, I want a hot dog sandwich, it just sounds like they just recently arrived from somewhere else.
A hot dog sandwich sounds disgusting.
It just sounds, but I've heard people say hot dog sandwich. So I think, okay, let's think about the reasons it's not a sandwich. It's not really configured the only thing that it really has in common, the thing that would allow its Venn diagram circle to touch and maybe slightly overlap the circle for sandwich, is that it is meat between two pieces of bread-like material. But the reason it's not a sandwich,
like a grinder or a hoagie.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the kind of stuff where Socrates and Plato used to get kind of bogged down, and Socrates would go, what about a grinder? And Plato would say, exactly what kind of grinder are you referring to? But No, that could be the dating app. Who knew? But no. So I think one of the things that characterizes a sandwich is, first of all, its horizontal nature. A hot dog is upright. Um, a There's so many double entendres that are possible here. But anyway, a hot dog is upright. A sandwich is lying flat on the plate. And in lying flat on the plate, and I think I'm on firm footing here, is that one of the goals of the sandwich, of the maker of the sandwich, is to use the bread to exert a soft, vice-like, effect upon the contents of the sandwich. In other words, there's one slice of bread, then you get your stuff that's in the sandwich, you get the other slice of bread. Now, everybody's following me, right?
But what about the open-faced sandwich?
See, that's an open,
sandwich.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's good. That's another stroll around the stroll around Athens while we work this out. But you see right away you have to say open faced. So what you're saying is a sandwich whose natural resting state has been disturbed for some kind of purpose. And let's face it, the only time anybody eats an open faced sandwich is after Thanksgiving, and you put the turkey and the dressing and some gravy on it and stuff like that, and then you eat the open faced sandwich. Nobody goes and says, "I'd like an open faced Reuben, please." There are places you could be locked up for saying something like that.
The arguments that I've always had turn into, which sides are the bread on? And if it's side to side, that's fine. But then you get into, is a taco a sandwich? That's a whole other stroll around Athens.
That's a stroll around Mexico City. I can't. Gabriel Garcia Marquez was emphatic about the fact that a taco is not a sandwich. Well, all I can say is that we were going to do a show tomorrow about Pandora's box, and we have to postpone it. But I think you have opened up a Pandora's jar of mayonnaise anyway. And so our number is 888-720-9677. I know you weren't planning to call up, but now Bob may have, he may have lit a fire underneath your personal sandwich. So 888-720-9677. That would be a toasted sandwich. 888-720-WNPR. You don't have to call up about sandwiches. I mean, I'm not suggesting we devote the rest of the show to that topic. I want to make that clear. All right, we're just going to keep going here because anything is fair game, and Marcia Grace is going to show us that. Marcia Grace from Long Island. Welcome to our show.
Beautiful Sound Beach. Thank you, Colin. I'm so thrilled, and I have to tell you, I've been listening to your show for years, and I just love it.
Oh, gosh.
Thank you for what you do. Okay, my pet peeve, among many, is why is it that the banks and the credit card companies can charge the usurious rates of interest when you borrow money from them? How is it that they're allowed to charge 25, 30, 35%? I mean, nobody else can do that.
Well, the Milton Friedman answer would be because that's what the market will bear. But I think we can get a little bit more sophisticated about that. And first, although that is at the nut of it, it is. And if people are willing to pay confiscatory rates, then you because you are a greedy multinational bank, you charge those rates. But I think another thing that happens is, credit card companies operate a little bit like drug dealers. You know how the whole idea, your first little taste is for free. The drug dealer tries to get you hooked. And then once you're hooked, you'll pay a lot. You'll pay a lot to get what you want. So there's a little bit of that, right? Our introductory rate is 0 APR. That's part of it. And then I think it is whatever people are actually willing to tolerate. But, the other thing is it creates all kinds of different classes of users. There are some people, I might even know one of these people very well, though it's not me, who are really agile at just kind of rolling credit card balances.
That's me.
That's you.
Yep, I know that.
You just go find that new 0 APR and just take that balance from the one that's going up to 22, and you just roll the thing over, and you're just.
Yep, that's what I've been doing for years.
So, first of all, why are you complaining? You figured out how to beat the system. It was right there waiting for you all along. So, but see, I'm not that kind of person. I would never have the kind of concentration and alertness and nimbleness to do things like that. So what I do is I pay my credit cards off every single month. But But yeah, as long as we're talking about that, could I tell you, Marcia Grace, one of my pet peeves?
Mm-hmm.
So here it is. This whole sort of 3% charge that is levied on everything every time you use the card that the vendor has to pay. The people that you are paying have to give 3% of it or whatever it is to the credit card companies, which first of all creates this kind of chain of interest that the credit card companies receive. And so fine, that's the way they do it, whatever. And I do make an effort to bring some cash with me because there's some situations like you go to a farmer's market and they're all set up now to use your credit card, but let's face it, they're farmers. They're probably not operating on a big margin. They need the cash. They don't want to pay 3% to a credit card company. But I feel like nonprofits these days, when I give to charity, quite frequently the charity will understandably say, would you mind raising your $100 donation to $103 or your $500 donation to $515, so you'll be paying the fee too. And I find myself looking at that and thinking, they should make it more easy for me just to send them a check, because I'd be happy to do that. But it's sort of like the whole online experience defaults into a credit card donation. Or the banks should, with nonprofits, waive that fee. I mean, just for goodwill and peace toward humankind, just say, all right, well, if it's, Doctors Without Borders, no, we're not going to charge 3%. But I think for the same reason that they'll charge 25% interest, they're probably not going to waive but I think that would be a lovely thing to do. And if I were president, which could happen, I think the whole ticket is not settled. I could wind up president as a nominee from any party, but it's something I would really push them on. But anyway, it's an interesting topic because we get so used to just.
I think it's only it's just like the tip of the iceberg, because when you think about, as a business, as you're pointing out, they have to pay the percentage to the to the credit card companies as well. So they're getting it from both ends. And things like Airbnb, for instance. I mean, other companies then get the drift, and they say, "Oh, okay, banks could do that. I can do that too." So now we have, places like Airbnb who charge exorbitant amounts of money on both ends, and they make out like bandits. So it's crazy.
I think we're the ones getting it on both ends. But anyway, thanks very much for your call, Marcia Grace. I'm going to jump over to Jimmy for a second, and then John, Kristen, Phil, you're all on my radar screen, etc. We've got another credit card discussion, which could go on and on today. So here's Jimmy from Hartford. Let me get up there. Hi, Jimmy. You have a thought.
Howdy.
Hi.
Yes. So I wanted to expand upon what Bob was talking about with is a hot dog a sandwich. There is actually a rule for this. It is referred to as the cube rule of food, and it determines what an object is based on the number of sides that food is contained with by starch. So if you have bread on one side of an object, that is toast. Pizza is toast. If you have two sides of the object contained by a starch, that's a sandwich.
Okay.
As you mentioned, a Reuben is a sandwich.
Yeah.
Now, this is where it starts to get a little funky. If the object is contained on three sides, it is a taco. This is where a hot dog falls, because the hot dog is contained on the left, right, and bottom side of the hot dog by bread. This makes it a taco. Four sides gives you a burrito. Pigs in a blanket is a burrito. Five sides is a bread bowl, and six sides makes something a calzone. And it's amusing that you brought up Greek philosophy, because when referred to this cube rule of food, somebody considered Diogenes would be rolling in his grave if he heard about this. And, of course, that makes Diogenes rolling in his grave a calzone.
Boy, you've got real material. First of all, I want to say I applaud the comprehensiveness and kind of immaculateness, drippy tacos notwithstanding, of this whole. I mean, this isn't something that somebody's making up on the spot here. This is a very, very well worked out idea that goes through 6 stages. Wow, that is impressive. And I feel somewhat overmatched there. Although I will say this. First of all, I don't disagree with any of that. I mean, it's a little strange that a hot dog is a taco, but it's not going to ruin my day or anything. It seems to me the other question is, how much of the filling is exposed? Like the weird thing about a hot dog is, yeah, it's contained on 3 sides, but then that 4th side has way more exposure than, say, the bologna in a bologna sandwich. It's there for your inspection, and you can put other things onto it, like ketchup and mustard and sauerkraut. And so I feel as though, although once again, I defer to you. You are somebody has worked through this in a very pervasive manner that I applaud. But I feel like there are still some open questions here, and one of them would be the exposure of filling. But I'll defer to you. You'll have the last word, Jimmy.
Yes, the thing that gets people is the hot dog is one of the few food items that you are frequently adding to after you receive it from whoever you get it from.
Right.
So that confuses people. It's like you're adding mustard or onions or relish. Does that change what it is? Maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe it does.
To think about, and you go back through this. An open-faced sandwich, by the way, turns into toast as soon as you open it up. But it's one of those enjoyable discussions you can have with family. It's a weak opinion strongly held,
yes,
one might say.
That was also very beautifully put, Jimmy. Excellent work. Wow. All right, we're going to take a break because I can't improve on that. Although I think it is important to understand the default understanding of a hot dog is, as Jimmy and I were both suggesting, it's incomplete at the beginning. The person providing you with a hot dog needs to know more from you about what you think a hot dog is. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back.
Whenever I see your smiling face, I have to smile myself, 'cause I love you, yes I do. And when you give me that sexy little a song coming on, and I'm warning you, it's a victorious, happy and glorious new strain. I feel a song coming on. It's a melody full of the laughter of children out after the rain. You hear a tuneful story bringing through ya love and glory.
Oh, that's the wonderful Claire Martin. All right, so let's get this one out of the way. We're jumping a little bit here, and John and Kristen and Phil, I haven't forgotten about you, but just because it'll be bothering me until I put him on the air. Dan from West Hartford. Dan, I know who this is, but you have the floor.
Yes, I'm a fellow who had a sandwich named after me at a deli in West Hartford. And it was not open-faced, it was two-faced. But
by the way, you owe me lunch. I'd like to point that out. You owe me lunch.
And it's going to be a two-faced sandwich. Yes, I was going to call. Yes. So
this is Dan Haar, by the way. This is the famous newspaper columnist Dan Haar. Just for people who hadn't figured that out. Yeah.
I've graduated from Danny. This is good.
Yeah.
I did a little research. There was some bemoaning over the weekend about the playing time of, or not just the weekend, for the whole past week, of the playing time of certain members of the men's Olympic basketball team, and especially Jason Tatum, who sat out 2 games, what they call in hockey a healthy scratch. He didn't play in both games against Serbia. So I went into the numbers, and I crunched all the numbers, and I saw the total minutes of all 12 players. There were 6 players from Eastern Conference teams and 6 players from Western Conference teams, right? LeBron James, Stephen Curry, and
Devin Booker.
Devin Booker, right.
Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, people like that, yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so the 6 players from the West averaged 21 minutes a game, 21.8. The 6 players from the East averaged 12. And while that seems like a big difference, especially when you have 6 and 6, the most dramatic fact of this is the player in the West who had the least minutes, that would be Anthony Edwards, who I believe plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves, had 97.7 minutes, more minutes than the player from the East, Bam Adebayo, from I believe Miami, who had the most minutes. So not one single player of the 6 from the Eastern Conference had as many minutes as the least played player in the West. That has to tell you that Kerr, the coach of the team and also the coach of the Golden State Warriors, played favorites and put the gold medal at risk.
Well, first of all, I like how your voice is like modulating up into this kind of Mike and the Mad Dog timbre now. I mean, you just look like totally in WFAN mode here. I don't know. Didn't it? They did win. I mean, I understand the number one job of Steve Kerr in this situation is to mollify sorehead Celtic fans. The number two job is to win the gold medal. So he got one of those two jobs done. It wasn't the big one. He got the second most important thing done. He won the gold medal. I don't know. I'm willing to give him a pass just this once. But
well, as our friend Bill Usman put it, a couple of bounces or a call going the other way in the Serbia game, certainly, and arguably in the gold medal game as well, they wouldn't have won. They're down by 15 in the fourth quarter against Serbia. That's not that game can go either way.
Well, but we know which way it did go, don't we? Don't we? I think I actually would like hosting on WFAN. All right. So we're going to go back to sort of normal programming. Iman, even though you're a celebrity, I just can't take you next because I really have other people have been waiting. But don't go away because there are a lot of people who are, even one person wrote to me and said that Iman from New Haven should be the vice presidential candidate. I think it was before Tim Walz got the nod. But all right, here's John from Middletown. Hi, John.
Hi, Colin. Longtime fan, first-time caller. Long time going back to WTIC days. And I have a peeve as well.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the music so loud on movies? And not only movies, anything that I play, any drama that I get from a streaming service, whether it's intended to be played in a movie theater or not, is startlingly loud. It actually hurts my ears. And I just don't understand why other people aren't offended and up in arms and why it doesn't change.
Yeah, I think people are bothered by this, particularly in movie theaters, because you can't control the volume in movie theaters. And what we really need is someone like James Handley here to explain it a little bit more. But what I do know is that a lot of these movies are sonically designed so that the audio effects that are supposed to happen can only happen if the movie is played at a certain volume. And that's a problem also because so many movies are shown at multiplexes now. You almost have to crank the sound loud enough. For example, really a really well edited movie in terms of sound design. Sound will come at you from different locations around the theater. You might have a heartbeat suddenly back behind where your head is and stuff like that. But to get that, everything has to be cranked up to a certain level or it won't happen. And it's a real problem with multiplexes. I saw the prequel to the Quiet Place series in a movie theater, and I could hear the music from like two different movies that weren't The Quiet Place because that's a very quiet movie because people have to be quiet. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and it does seem deafening sometimes. I mean, you can walk out of the movie theater and your ears are ringing. And so anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Fall Guy the other day on TV.
Yeah.
And as I say, a lot of these things will never be in a theater. And yet they have the same amount of volume on and then you strain to hear the dialogue after the music is over.
That's bad sound design. In other words, if it's interfering with the dialogue, because that doesn't make any sense. But I get what you're saying, and I know that you're not entirely wrong. All right, she's a celebrity. We'll go to her next. But Kristen and Phil, I promise you will be heard. You will be heard, and you will be appreciated. Iman from New Haven, what is on your mind today?
Hi, Colin. Can I actually say something quickly about basketball?
You may.
Just that, I know we're Americans and we think we have to win everything, should win everything, but I do think what makes sports so exciting is that you actually don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And as the rest of the world gets better at basketball, it means that it will be more competitive, and we might not win gold at every single Olympics. And I think that's okay, because that means that when we do win gold, it's like truly, truly worth it. So I want the rest of the world to get better, all the sports, so it's always competitive.
Yeah, and the rest
and
of
I think we should want that.
Right. I totally agree. You want competitive stuff. You want it to be exciting. And the rest of the world is getting competitive. I mean,
Exactly.
Serbia and France and countries like that, I mean, they send a lot of players to the NBA, and they are good. And I think that does make it exciting. I think
I almost had a heart attack during the women's U.S. basketball championship. I really did. I almost died yesterday. It was terrible. But we won by 1 point, and it was okay. And I don't want to hear that Caitlin Clark should have been there, because then I'll scream.
Right.
Anyways,
I think, just to sort of echo what you're saying, too, I mean, for a long time, that was the problem in women's basketball, too, that there was UConn and Tennessee and a couple of other powerhouses, and I'm talking about 90s, early aughts, stuff like that. And it, a lot of times UConn would be playing a team and would double its score early in the second half. I remember my son and I were there one time, and it got so lopsided. We were at Gamble at UConn. It was like 60-30, and we just went out and ran on the outdoor track because we were so bored. Because you wanted to be competitive. Anyway, that's not what you're calling up about. You're calling about something else.
I'm calling about winking, and maybe you could do a show about this. I don't know if you've ever done a show about this.
No, but it's the kind of show we do. Would you like to produce it?
So I don't really know how to wink, and last week I started in a frenzy trying to practice how to wink. And my eye muscles are like twitchy. My face looks like very spastic, and like I wink in front of my wife a lot, and then she like rates me from 1 to 10, and usually I get a 6, or she just starts laughing at me.
So explain this more. Explain what you're. In other words, you don't know how to wink. You keep one eye open and you close the other one. So
Wait,
I mean, you must know how to do that.
Can you wink? Well, no, because like all the muscles in my face twitch when I do it. Like I can't just like do the one eye, and I feel like. A good winker, they can communicate different things. Like they can flirt with a wink. They can be sarcastic with a wink. They can do all these subtle communications with a wink. And I just have this one eye just going crazy, and it just doesn't look good, And I really feel like one should not be winking unless you can get like 8.5 on a wink scale.
Well, I think, first of all, it's dangerous to be winking if you're not in control of it, because, as you say, winks are open to multiple interpretations.
Yeah, and sometimes I just blink. Like, it's just not.
I would say that the good news is that as a young person, you're probably only, 10 years away from, if 10 years away, maybe less.
Keep practicing.
Well, no, it just means like within a few years, there'll be some kind of, Oculus type glasses embedded in people's corneas, and you'll be able to, push a little button on your forearm that transmits an emoji wink to the person looking at you, and you won't even be doing this kind of stuff anymore. It'll all be digital. It'll all be pre-programmed. Well, you could always be a Luddite, or back to the earth, back to nature kind of person. You're going to do your own winking. You don't need.
Can I say one thing about why I've all of a sudden become like very like I want to learn how to wink? There was this woman I was sparring when I was boxing, and after we finished sparring, every single time she would wink at me. And she was, first of all, very beautiful, and sometimes she'd kick my butt, and she'd wink at me. And I was just like, what does this mean? And I feel like it was so powerful. It like had me in my head for like weeks. I mean, I still talk about this. This was like 2 years ago. And I feel like I would like to have that power in the
Did
world.
you ever ask her what she meant by winking?
No, I didn't, because it's just like, well, and I couldn't even ask other people because it's like a wink is so intimate and personal. Like I couldn't be sure anyone else saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, I didn't ask her.
It seemed to be a reasonable thing to do. Just say, I'm just curious, when you wink at me like that, like, are you being nice to me? Are you making fun of me? You're saying, I gotcha.
No.
I feel like in that context, it's kind of, I gotcha that time, Yeah. I think that's what the wink means. In which case you're right to be in your head about that, because she got you and then she winked at you.
Yeah.
It's like a Seinfeld episode, it feels like. Let me explain to you who Seinfeld was. All right, no, we'll take a little break here. We've been talking to Iman. Well, no, I should get Phil on. Phil's been waiting a long time. Thank you, Iman. As usual, we should do a whole show about winking. And I'm trying to think about what are some of the great winks ever. I feel like it's a thing, and we probably would have to do the third segment would have to be about the soft drink. And I think there was a whole cult about that soft drink, Wink, right? Because you could only get it in certain places or something, or am I making all that up? And then they didn't make it anymore. There were people who really liked that too. So that's the whole show. We had 2 segments about ocular winking, and then the third segment would be about the beverage. All right, let's move on to Phil. Phil in Durham. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, Colin.
We're zooming right along here on this show. What's on your mind?
This is a first-time caller, and you have a great show all the time. Very, very interesting. Actually, one thing was on my mind, but now 2 because of the woman who called, lady called in from Long Island, I believe.
Yeah.
Mentioned credit cards.
Yep.
And about 15 years ago or so, CPTV did a documentary on that very subject, and it was a local, and it had Richard Blumenthal, our then Attorney General. Elizabeth Warren was not a senator yet. She was still a professor. She was on it. And Thomas Dodd, our senator, and...
Well, if it was Thomas Dodd, it was on a long time ago.
I'm sorry, Chris Dodd.
Dodd, okay.
Chris Dodd and Barney Franks. And what they said briefly was 34, I believe, attorney generals went to the Supreme Court to try to get the Supreme Court to reverse these high interest rates that the credit card companies were charging. And the Supreme Court came back and said, nope, it's okay. And that was back then. So I just wanted to add that to the show.
I mean, I think you'd have to prove collusion, right? You'd have to prove, and I'm sure Blumenthal would have been going in that direction. You'd have to prove collusion, that the banks were conspiring or colluding in order to maintain these high interest rates and not competing with one another. Although I feel like reality undercuts that a little bit anyway. I mean, I think, we all get credit card offers all the time where they're offering us supposedly something better. Usually there's a rock buried in the snowball somewhere, but it looks better initially. It looks all white and fluffy, right?
That's true. It offers all the time 0% to start off and to get you enticed and all that. The other thing I want to mention, I hate to bring Trump up, but I'm going to.
It's okay.
What he keeps trying to take, well, of course, he wants to gut Social Security, but the other thing about Obamacare, health care, he wants to get rid of that. And I know the Supreme Court just ruled recently that, like, the EPA and government departments will find it much more difficult to do what they do.
The elimination of Chevron deference is
right.
part of it, yeah.
And this is one way, supposedly, of him going after health care to get rid of it. But they went to the Supreme Court. John Roberts ruled, they all ruled, that he could not get rid of health care unless 3 things happened. Number 1, it was cheaper. Number 2, it was better. And number 3, there was no break in it. It stopped. When the minute one stopped, the other began. So I guess my question is, how can he try to even get rid of American health care for people?
Well, it's a good question. It probably is on page 623 of Project 2025. I haven't read that far into it. But, I think this is one of the reasons we have political campaigns. We have political campaigns. If they serve any useful purpose, it is for the clarification of the plans and proposals of each side. And it should be pretty, the ACA is incredibly popular. It was controversial when Obama was getting it through, but it's no longer controversial. People overwhelmingly approve of the ACA. So, if the Harris-Walz team is smart and effective, and if in fact Trump hasn't walked back his plans to do away with the ACA, they should hit him hard with it because it's an unpopular position. So I don't know. That's all I have to contribute right now. But I do worry about that stuff because people are so vulnerable around healthcare. All right. So I really have to break here. But Linda from Simsbury, important call. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
I've never known one. What do they do? We've all heard the legends, but can they be true? My cousin's best friend's boyfriend once nearly cooked a meal. So is a good man real?
And we are back. We are privileged today to have as our technical producer, the Jedi Master himself, the man who controls the Force, Gene Amatruda. Jonathan McPants is the producer of this episode. He's the person screening the calls as well. And speaking of calls, we have room for yours right now at 888-720-9677. You don't have to elaborate or build on any of the things that have been said so far, although you are welcome to. Or 888-720-WNPR. We go now to our Sandwich correspondent, Linda in Simsbury. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Just fine.
I just had to call with my comments on the cut of sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so much of our lifelong understandings of the big issues in life start in elementary school. And for me, my father always cut our sandwiches on the horizontal, for packing to take the school lunches.
Yeah.
And I grew up on Staten Island before the bridge was built. And after about second grade, there was an influx of diagonally cut sandwiches showing up in the lunchroom, which I equated with fancy.
Yeah.
And I still call it fancy. I actually debated whether to introduce them to my daughter as the regular cut when I was making her sandwiches. And I was wondering if other people have that same either regional feel for it, recognizing that like horizontal is from home or an era or a region. My father came from New England, and I kind of thought maybe that's what they did up there.
Right. Well, these are all very good questions, first of all. I do feel as though one of the things is I've done some work trying to get this show put together.
You have to.
And failing to bring it to fruition. One of the things that has crossed my mind is we know what a diagonal cut is. We don't really have quite the right word for the other kind of, maybe more traditional kind of cut. Like horizontal isn't exactly quite right. Basically, it's a cut that cuts it into two rhomboid, vaguely rectangular, as opposed
parallel to the crust.
Yeah. So
Right.
something like
top and bottom.
something like that. Yeah. There isn't a really good word for it, or either that or
It's rectangular.
yeah,
Right.
rectangular cut, I guess. I don't know. I don't love any of those things. So I just want to go back. So you made a decision about how you were going to bring your daughter up, diagonal or rectangular. And did you decide rectangular? Because we're salt of the earth. We don't think we're better than anybody else. This is an Astor place, that kind of thing.
Well, grilled cheese at home was always on the diagonal because that was a fancy sandwich. And I would always tell her when I cut it into rectangular pieces that this is the way my father, her grandfather, always made my sandwiches. And I always I would tell her that when I would cut them on the diagonal, that I would say, "Here you go, honey. Here's a fancy sandwich."
Well, so there's several things to say about this. First of all, Nicholson Baker, the great author, would say that the diagonal cut has one obvious advantage, which is you can start nibbling the sandwich kind of at its corner, whereas with the more traditional kind of cut, I think he compares it to trying to push a piano through a door. It's just there isn't a good way to do that. Now, I would say the following, because you bring up grilled cheese, and just grilled cheese, that's fine. Grilled cheese and tomato is interesting.
Oh, forget it.
Yeah,
anything you add tomato to. Yep.
Right. Well, but I think you're better with the rectangular cut because you can sort of pre-plan because you're going to put your tomatoes in such a way that they're less likely to spill out particularly if you've got smallish tomatoes. You might have two circular slices of tomato, and they could be poised. And the reason this is on my mind, I did this for the person with whom I share a life. I made her a lovely grilled cheese and tomato sandwich on Sunday because that's the kind of loving, kind, sweet-tempered person I am. But I gave some thought to this, and I thought when I cut it, I could probably cut it in such a way that I don't disturb the tomatoes very much, but not if I cut it diagonally. You're following me, I can tell.
Or that they don't fall out.
Yeah. Right.
And the other thing I've found with myself and my daughter was that small hands can manage a rectangularly cut sandwich a little bit better if there's anything that might fall out, like
Good
pieces
point.
of lettuce or tomato.
Good
Yeah,
point.
they can get a good grip, but when that point is there, anything can fall out. And, that's horrible.
Yeah. All right. I think this has been a very enlightening conversation. It has stirred up inside me tremendous guilt about the fact that I haven't finished this show, or like I'm about 1/10 of the way into the work I have to do. But all right, so let's go. This is not sandwich related, but it's sandwich adjacent, and it might be the last call of the day. I'm not sure. We have Liz on the line. Hi, Liz. Oh, maybe we don't have Liz on the line. Now we have Liz on the line. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Colin. How are you?
Just fine.
I love your show, and I have called before when I lived in Roxbury. Anyway, I wanted to talk about or ask about Kamala Harris and Trump saying that there shouldn't be taxes on tips. And I graduated from college when you did, and I lived with a woman in New York who didn't declare her taxes on tips. And when it came to getting Social Security, she hadn't paid in enough. So don't you think that's kind of short-sighted?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and I hadn't really thought about that part of it. It seems to me that any kind of no taxes on tips provision has to at least create a mechanism, now that you say this, has to create a mechanism where at least the amount of those tips is being kind of entered into the financial record. And but if you're that's a really interesting question. Do you pull out the FICA stuff from the tips? Like, you're not going to tax them as income, but I would assume, for the exact reason that you're saying, that you would want to withdraw the normal amount of Social Security, because otherwise you're setting that person up for failure, assuming we think that Social Security is going to be around indefinitely.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's a really good question. I haven't heard anybody bring it up. So my preference is still, I don't know. I mean, what's interesting is that wait staff is all over the place on this. It's not like all of them say, oh, yes, that's what I need. What a lot of them say is, no, I need a wage that is comparable to the wages of people who aren't, wait staff, who aren't in the service profession like this. And obviously, if you travel, you realize we're a little unusual that way. There are an awful lot of countries where nobody's expected to tip, or you could leave €1 if you thought somebody did something special for you. But the reason that's
were included at least years ago.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. For example, Fire by Forge, which is run, I think, essentially as a nonprofit by a nonprofit here in Hartford, they put the service charge right into your bill. You just get it. It's 18%. And then you're free to tip more if you want to, but it's right in there already. I don't know how that turns up in the actual wages, but I assume it's all taxable. But I think that's a better and fairer way to do things, is just make sure people are paid a decent amount of money and not having to rely so much on tips. And I think the people faced with the task of paying tips would appreciate that kind of clarity. Anyway, we have to stop, but thanks very much for calling in. Bob, sorry I didn't get you on a second time, but sometimes that's the way the sandwich bounces. From time